So climate generations offices are on the stolen and occupied lands of the Dakota and Anishinaabe people. We recognize the immense harm caused by centuries of genocide, cultural erasure, and injustice. We also acknowledge that much of what we know of the United States, including its culture, economic growth, and development, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans, their descendants, and their ascendants who suffered the horror of the transatlantic trafficking of their people, chattel slavery, Jim Crow, and other harms that continue today. We are indebted to their labor and their sacrifice, and we must acknowledge the tremors of that violence throughout the generations and the resulting impact that can still be felt and witnessed today. Additionally, we recognize the immigrant and American-born workers of African, Asian, and Central and South American descent, whose labor remains hidden in the shadows, but still contributes to the well-being of our collective community. Next slide, please, Zoe. We regularly talk about how to move beyond just words in our land and labor acknowledgement. And so on this slide, there are the logos of 4 organizations, 3 of whom are represented by our delegates. And the invitation to those in the audience is that if you have the ability to make a gift to one of these organizations, it is a form of reparations that moves us beyond acknowledgement. COPAL is an organization that our delegate Melody Artiega is from. She's not with us this evening, but they work to support the Latinx community throughout Minnesota. McGizzy is a program down the street from our own offices. And Tavia is a delegate from that organization, and she can tell you more about it, but they do fantastic STEM and leadership development with Indigenous youth. The Chisholm Legacy Project is an African-American centered environmental justice project that is based all over the country, but primarily in the South. They do really amazing work, and it's quite possible that folks from our delegation will meet Jackie, who is the executive director of that organization, while they're in COP. And then Wakan Tipi is another local organization based in St. Paul that our delegate Jen is a part of, and they are protecting sacred sites and culture in St. Paul for the Dakota and Lakota people. So again, if you have the ability, please make a gift to one of these organizations, or at least go on their websites and check out their amazing work and lift it up in your own channels and communities. Next slide. Thanks, Zoe. Climate generation ignites and sustains the ability of educators, youth, and communities to act on systems perpetuating the climate crisis. We envision a just and abundant world beyond the climate crisis. For more than 18 years, we have been building climate literacy, amplifying personal connections to climate change, and developing powerful advocates among educators, youth, and communities through collaboration and partnership. Our work addresses climate change in 3 areas: education, youth activism, and community engagement. And if you want to know more about climate generation, you should go to our website. You can read about all the things we have going on, and you can peruse an amazing bank of climate stories written by people all over the world, and also access an entire library of climate change education curriculum and resources and toolkits and all sorts of really lovely things that are completely free. Anybody can download them. Next slide, please. So what the heck is COP? The United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. This convention was established way back in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro at an Earth Summit and a conference of United Nations folks wanting to gather to talk about environment and development. And they created this convention to hold them together and bind them together to continue to be in conversations about how at a global level they could address climate change. That convention is in a way the first climate treaty. And since that, the year after that, I think, was the first COP in Berlin, and we are now on number 29. COP stands for Conference of the Parties. So the parties are all the countries that signed that original convention and any subsequent treaties. Next slide. So again, parties are the countries that have signed the UNFCCC, the Kyoto Protocol. If you remember, that was one of the COPs that happened in Japan back in the days of Bill Clinton. The Doha Amendment to the Kyoto Protocol. So that was another treaty that kind of put into place some things related to implementation of the Kyoto Protocol. And then what is better known and most famous is the Paris Agreement. So each year when they gather for COP, they continue to negotiate about the implementation of all of those treaties. And so it's like there's like 4 rounds of negotiations going on all at the same time. And in addition to the parties, civil society is invited to be in the space and both observe those negotiations, but also spend time getting to know people from around the country and, brainstorming solutions and taking action together and doing lots of things like that, learning together, sharing. Civil society includes other United Nations agencies and their staff, other intergovernmental organizations like, the African Developmental and the, things like that. So intergovernmental organizations and non-governmental organizations like Climate Generation. Those civil society organizations are divided up into constituencies. Next slide. So the constituencies are, and they're really clever, fun names, Bingo, which is the constituency for business and industry, NGOs, IPO, or Indigenous Peoples Organizations, ENGO, environmental organizations like Climate Generation. We are part of ENGO. RINGO, which is academia, right? Research and independent NGOs. Youngo is the youth constituency, so all young people can be a part of Youngo, and young people in United Nations language is anyone 35 and under. The LGMA are local government and municipal authorities, so if you work for, say, the city of Minneapolis and they are accredited, you could be badged as part of that constituency. Tungo, it's like a poem, isn't it? Tungo are the trade union folks, and WGC are women and gender specific. So organizations that work on women's rights and gender justice kind of issues. And so each of those constituencies has a person or a couple people who are appointed by the United Nations to be what are called focal points. And so those of us that are part of a particular constituency can go to that focal point to get information or contribute to what they're bringing to the table of negotiations. So there's lots of layers and very confusing sometimes. Next slide, Zoe. So now, without waiting any further, we're going to spend some time meeting the delegates. So I'm going to invite folks one at a time to introduce themselves, name, pronouns, your organizational home, and then tell us all briefly what sparked your interest in joining the delegation this year. We're going in alphabetical order, so Analia, you are first up. You can stop slides now.
Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Analia Seguir dos Santos. I use she, her, and hers pronouns. Sorry, I have a little bit of a sore throat today. So, are we like following prompts? My nephew was talking to me really quick. Sorry.
I'm going to type them into the chat.
Thank you. So I'm the Environmental Justice Youth Program Director and Global Climate Justice Coordinator with Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. This will be my 4th COP this year, and So I love being in connection with climate generation. A lot of our youth work, I run Youth Empower network and the group collab, and I feel like we're in a lot of the same conversations, and it feels like we're in a organizational slash movement home together. So that's why I wanted to join the climate generation delegation. I'm also kind of serving as the house mother role for the delegation, because I've been to 3 COPs already. One of my roles is to really make sure that everyone, especially the young folks, but everyone feels like we're in a unit, even if we're not together 24 hours a day, but that everyone feels supported on the ground. And if they have questions about, what is going on every day, I'm still learning myself. So usually most days I'm also like, maybe I might have one degree more knowledge of what's going on. So if I can provide that as support to uplift everyone in their first or second COP experience, that's what I'm here for. And then I am also in the leadership of US Fair Shares. So that track is why I'm attending COP this year, and really excited to be talking about and leaning into conversations around climate reparations, and the United States especially accepting our fair share. So that's me. Thanks.
Thanks, Analia. And Tavia, you're up next.
Hi, bonjour, Antavia Indigenous Cause. My name is Antavia. My pronouns are preferred to be she, her, quay. I'm Lax Band Ojibwe and Spirit Lake Nation. My organizational home is McGizzy, which thank you, Susan, for that beautiful introduction earlier. McGizzy offers programming for Native American youth in the Twin Cities area, specifically targeting the South Minneapolis area. We're not too far from Little Earth. And so any youth out there who are interested in programming, please check us out. We offer tutoring services, all kinds of things. My role there is I manage the Green Tech Institute there, which means that I develop curriculum that is culturally competent to work with Native American youth, to introduce STEM topics and learning opportunities, as well as hands-on career building experiences for them. I also do a lot of college prep for them. And I come to them with a lot of personal expertise. I myself grew up in South Minneapolis as a Native American girl. I am also surprised that I went on to become a chemist. And as part of my studies, I was lucky enough to develop and synthesize some nanomaterials for PFAS phytoremediation. And that really began my interest in utilizing the gifts that the ancestors have passed on to me to create a better world for our next 7 generations of children. And that includes education, which is one thing that I'm very passionate about, is educating the youth, but not just educating them in terms of academics, which are important, but also in terms of empowerment and leadership and compassion, and building their confidence. A lot of what I do is giving them a complicated thing and then expecting them to speak publicly on it. And so, for example, one project that we're working on right now, we were asked to develop some content giving Native youth voices to different tribal leaders in the state at a government-to-government forum between the Minnesota, the United States, and our sovereign tribal nations. And so the kids are doing a lot of research into climate change. And so I think that ties directly into obviously the work that I'm doing, my personal passions, but I would also say that's part of what sparked my interest in joining the delegation as well, is not only providing some racial mirroring for Native American girls, or just girls of color, women of color, who are, I think our youth are watching us a little bit more closely than I would say my generation or older. And the land that we're leaving is for them, right? And so they're paying attention. And so I like to think that, you know, they could see me and see that this is something that they could do someday. Once I'm ready to pass the torch on a little bit. Um, but then also out of just general curiosity too, I'm constantly looking for different ways that tribal nations around the globe have mitigated, you know, some level of what I would consider cultural genocide by way of um, climate change violence that's being perpetrated via pollution and having like a negative ecological relationship with the land. Um, and so looking at the way that tribal nations around the globe are mitigating some of those harms that have been and are potentially going to be caused. I had this dream not that long ago that I discovered this new form of sage that had evolved to be optimized for water environments. And just so also thinking about how are we like protecting our native plants and our plant medicines for use in the future too. And what do our future prophecies as Native people look like in regards to our relationship with the land and in the face of the climate disaster that's impending. Um, yeah, so that's what my interests are in.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Cook, you're next in our alphabetical lineup.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Gokbu, and I go by she, her. I am a graduate student at the University of Minnesota, where I am in the STEM education program. So that's also the reason why I'm so interested in attending COP29. So I'm very honored to be able to go. As part of the STEM education, I am focusing on climate justice, particularly how it impacts marginalized populations locally and then least developed countries globally. And one of the things that I am teaching is Natures in the City course. And through this opportunity, I'm able to have students follow. And what I'm going to have my students do is actually watch and follow along with the United Nations. And I told them, don't worry, I will, post everything I find and share everything with you so that they can do vlogs or blogs or TikToks, Instagrams, so that they can make it become, build awareness for others within their age group and their communities. So that's my purpose for going.
Thank you so much. I just lost the slide. Zoe, can you tell me who's next?
Ethan.
Is Ethan here? Yep. All right, Ethan, you're up.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ethan. I use they, he pronouns. I'm a first year at the University of Minnesota, and I'm a youth environmental activist leader alumni. And part of the reason why I'm interested in being the delegation is because I've served with Climate Generation as a youth leader, and I've worked with students and other youth leaders who are also interested in environmental justice. And for me, I think, I don't know, for some reason, I still consider myself like new to environmental justice, even though I've served a year with Climate Generation. Like there's always something to learn, there's always something to be aware about, and like a new way to like help the community. And that's where it all starts for me, is wanting to help the community. And that's why I want to serve the community through like environmental action and like climate action as well. And I think I also, with my work with Climate Generation, I've see, I've worked locally and in the state of Minnesota, like helping planning the annual Youth Climate Justice Summit for students to learn more about environmental justice. Also, like simultaneously, I was with the Minnesota Youth Council helping Climate Generation spread awareness of the climate justice education bill. And all of that work has been like in the state, has been locally, has been in the community. And I think I want to learn how like like expand like how climate work, how climate action is taken on like a global scale. And so that's something I want to learn.
Great. Thank you so much, Ethan. Next up is Jen Gray Eagle.
Hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Jen Gray Eagle. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and my family comes from the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. So I'm Oglala Lakota, and I work at Wakan Tipiawai Agapi as the Environmental Justice and Stewardship Program Manager. And yeah, why I'm interested in COP29. I think just to connect with like-minded people is probably my biggest intrigue, and also just to really connect on this local and global scale as well. I think especially on the global scale of things, I feel like the Indigenous narrative and like connecting with other Indigenous people, I think is really it's really helpful actually to connect because I feel like there's so many of us doing some very similar things, but we don't we don't often have that chance to meet each other and to connect and to essentially to sorry. Oh, sorry, never mind. But yeah, I think as far as, going to COP, I'm just, yeah, really excited to be around people that maybe understand what the work of Indigenous people are, like how nature has rights and how, I think we're coming at environmentalism a lot from a very humanistic scale. And I can't wait to have more conversations with people about how, we're not above anything in nature and we're not below it. And like, how do we actually become one with nature again? I think there's a lot of people on these global scales that are talking about those types of conversations. So yeah, I'm just excited in that way. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Manny Vasquez, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Manny Vasquez. I'm a sophomore at the University of St. Thomas. I use he, him pronouns. And my home organization would be Metro Blooms, which is a grant-based nonprofit that focuses on environmental like infrastructure and just rebuilding. In the past, we've done also youth and power. But yeah, for Metro Blooms in the past, we've done like rain gardens, rain barrels, and a lot of just like grant-based things in North Minneapolis because it's very underrepresented. And why I'm going to COP, this last summer I went to a climate reparations camp, and it really brought my perspective into the global aspect of climate reparations and like global climate justice. And I'm just really excited to learn as much as I can, network, and try to spread awareness to more like global issues. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Manny. Lucia has not arrived yet. So up next is Nick.
Lucia is
Cool.
here. Yep.
Lucia here. Oh, Lucia, welcome. Lucia, the prompt is your name, your pronouns, your organizational home, and what sparked your interest in joining the delegation.
Yeah, my name is Lucia Everest. I use she, her pronouns. And I guess my organizational home is probably, I'm a alumni, so probably Climate Generation. What sparked me wanting to go to COP was, or COP, was the talk about it in the program. And just for like the past 5 years, I've done work throughout like divestment legislation and like kind of the financial side of the climate crisis. And then as I kind of transitioned into like the more educational and the social justice side of it, I just really want to go and see youth activists from around the world and kind of see how they are similarly addressing issues and maybe differently, or try to find a community within that.
Great. Thank you. Welcome, dear. Now you're up, Nick.
Thanks, Susan. And hey, everybody, it's really good to be here with you this evening, this afternoon. My name is Nick Cleese. I use he, him pronouns, and my home organization is the Center for Climate Literacy at the University of Minnesota. We're a relatively new organization that focuses on supporting K-12 educators in doing climate literacy in their classrooms, all content areas, all grade levels, primarily through engagement with stories. I'm a teacher by training, and it's been a joy these past couple of years to engage with folks on the ground and work with young people as well. That's one of my main interests in going to COP is to connect with educators across the globe and learn from them, share ideas, share resources, and also to learn from my fellow delegates. I'm really excited to get to know more local folks and build relationships with the other folks with whom I'll be going. So I'm very fortunate and very grateful to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. I have a second prompt. Some of you may have talked a little bit about this already, but if you could expand, what are you excited to follow while you're in COP? Are you excited to follow a particular strand of negotiations? Are you excited to just hang out in the pavilions and meet like-minded people? Do you want to follow the role of young people? Just what are you really interested in diving deep into? Oh, I'm so sorry, Ramiro and Zoe. Last but not least, I'm going to back up. Y'all, I'm in too big of a hurry. It's been a long day. We have two staff people who are also delegates, and you should get to know them because they are amazing human beings. Ramiro, go ahead.
Bonjour. Hello, Mino Gigajet. Good evening. I'm honored to be a part of this team on this delegation. I appreciate everyone sharing out why they are attending. This will be my second year. I will share my name, Romero Vasquez Jr., he, him pronouns. Firstly, I'm a relative to all, enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Ojibwe Band located in Belcourt, North Dakota. I'm also the youth program manager / collaborator of the Youth Environmental Activist Network, which we met some of our students. I'm honored for them to be a part of this group, and Climate Generation, which the organization that is hosting us. So why I'm interested in this experience? Well, as you can see, the leaders are a part of this group, and alumni intergenerational perspectives and relationships are very important to me. So experiencing that with them, and also bringing this back to our current YAD network. So we have a student group of leaders, 10 of them, who plan a Youth Climate Justice Summit and are actually advocating for a climate justice education bill. They see this from a very localized perspective, but they also understand that it's international and global. So allowing them to really take back and capture what I see from my experiences as well. I was in Dubai last year, conference parties at 28. Thank you, Climate Generation. And that experience allowed me to connect with Indigenous delegations from the first nations of Canada, and they're advocating for Indigenous rights. That didn't go that well last year. We were dissatisfied with what happened. So I'm hoping that we can really amplify that and elevate that this year, and also bring it back to my local community as well. So a lot of my interest is with Indigenous populations, and also this group of delegates that will be joining us. That is what brought me here. So I'll pass it on to Zoe.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zoe Redfern Hall, and I use she, her pronouns. I am the Senior Marketing and Communications Manager here at Climate Generation, and I'm also a alumni. Climate Generation is and has always been my organizing home. My perspective on storytelling as a powerful tool for change stems from the Youth Environmental Activist Program that Climate Generation has stewarded over the years. And for me, ultimately, the COP program is the ability to connect local action at a global scale, primarily through the stories and people that we get to connect with. So often COP is this thing where when people talk about it, when I have conversations with people, every day, folks in my community who are doing really important local climate action have no idea what COP is, or it's very rare. And I think that the program that Climate Generation puts on, very similarly to the other programs that we do here, is based in storytelling and having a deep connection to local, tangible change. So I'm really excited to connect with actors and people who are doing really powerful work, as all of the other amazing delegates have noted, across the world, because I think that's really inspiring for people here at home. That's really inspiring for myself as well. And it helps have a moment where we all can connect, where really, really powerful organizers from very different perspectives can connect. I think that the high level policy that's often happening can be really dissatisfying and frustrating. But there's so many moments that are happening in other parts of this very large, often complicated conference, where we have an opportunity as a delegation to see the humanity in other parts of the world and tell stories that the media is often not telling about COP. Often it's told in this way that people often are only getting a very mainstream perspective and are not getting the perspectives of folks who are getting sent by Climate Generation. And so not just this delegation, of course, but everyone else. And so something I'm particularly excited about is in the Climate Generation Window into COP digest that we're doing. This year, we have a new segment called local action at a global scale, right? So myself, Ramiro, and a few other folks on the team, every day when a digest is sent out, we'll be connecting with someone and telling their story and having a conversation so that people back home, people that have tuned into this call, get the opportunity to hear not just from the delegates who are going to be telling amazing stories and showing really, really cool things through photos and videos and blogs and all these things that we ask them to do, and they're so generous that they do that, but also from folks who we're chatting with on the ground. So I'm really excited for all of it. I'm mainly excited to be with these people, and I'm mainly excited to tell the stories. And I'll pass it back over to Susan.
Thank you. And Alia, thank you for joining us. We'll see you soon. So we're going to do one more round, and I'm going to kind of throw together two questions, because a lot of you talked a little bit in your introduction about sort of what you want to follow while you're in COP. So a two-parter, what are you thinking you want to follow? And what do you really want to bring home for your community back here in Minnesota? And we will, and Alia was first, so Antavia, you're up first.
Oh no. Okay. I think mine are probably obvious. I'm most interested in following like Indigenous land rights conversations, the IPO, and also youth voices. And I think that's probably pretty expected. I'm also just generally interested in gaining an awareness around process at that level, because I'm not really sure what to expect, to be frank. And I'm curious to also see how much I understand, given my context of who I am. And bringing back, I have a few years of experience doing graduate level editing for science communications. And so I have a huge, science communication is a huge passion of mine, but also like policy and technical language deciphering is something that I've done a lot of work on. And so I'd be curious to see if there's opportunities for me to utilize those skills to the benefit of my own community and the youth that I serve. So being able to take some weighty language and whittle it down to being a little bit more accessible, because even if a published article isn't going to be understood by all, the meat and potatoes, the concepts behind them can be understood by all because they're felt and affect all. And so yeah, that, and then also just inspiration for curriculum development too, gaining another level of understanding on what other Indigenous folks are doing, and just very excited to see if I can augment any ideas, you know, because colonization has affected different parts of the world in very different ways, and so I'm really curious to see how, yeah, how different the global Indigenous community is navigating that process and then bringing it back.
Thank you so much. Cook, you're up next.
Sure. So I had the privilege of attending a smaller version of COP29 last year, the SB 60 in Bonn, Germany. And I found that it was really useful to follow the RINGO, which is the research group. And with that, I pretty much followed the thread on the subsidiary body for scientific and technology advice. So I came into it and I thought that it would be like, oh, all these scientists, you know, at work to decide the best things. And I found that no, it's mostly policy, political and policy, and countries, you know, debating with each other. So I'll be following that to see kind of where the discussions, the negotiations from the SB 60 land at the COP29. So that's one of my main goals of following. And then the other one is one that I felt pulled to, I gravitated towards because I sat in a few and then I wanted to sit in more, is the local communities and Indigenous peoples platform. So I found that was very compelling as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Ethan, would you like to share?
Yes, of course. So what I'm excited to follow is like, I guess like anything youth related. I'm very interested in what other youth across like the country are doing at like their local level, what processes have they've been through, and also like to learn from them as well, and maybe take some of their like advice or feedback and bring it back to Minnesota. I also plan to vlog my experience at COP29 in hopes to, I guess, how do I describe this? Like showing a youth perspective at COP29. And then if any other students stumble across the video, then they see, oh, there was a student who went to COP29 and this was their experience. And maybe this is something that I could be a part of as well. I'm kind of like inspiring them and I guess inspiring them to get into environmental justice.
Cool. Thank you. Jen?
Yeah, well, I think I'll be so interested to, well, I'm still kind of in shock a little bit that I'm still considered a youth on a national scale. So I think I'll be excited to follow a bit of what the youth are saying. I think young folks are extremely correct about a lot of things all the time. And I think as a society, we've kind of fallen away from listening to youth. So I'll be really interested to see what's kind of happening on that scale. I'll be really, yeah, and of course, Indigenous peoples organizations, and I think any other folks who work for environmental nonprofits as well. I'll be interested to connect with folks like that because I think there's like huge discussions about climate adaptation and climate mitigation. And I feel like there's a lot of different ways that people are kind of tackling that issue or trying to figure out how to deal with climate change. And I think we've always heard, even a few years ago, that, you know, climate change is a future thing. And I think we're realizing though that it's happening to a lot of people even today. And I mean, we're at the end of October and it was 80 degrees here in Minnesota. So I think people are probably seeing some really real changes around the globe. And so I think, yeah, I'll be interested to see if there's any conversations about climate adaptation as well as mitigation. And yeah, and I liked what Antavia said about, just trying to decipher what this all means coming from, our perspectives. And I'm excited to do that for folks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Lucia, what are you interested in following and bringing home?
I think I'm most interested in kind of something that I didn't know about COP before kind of hearing about it through the climate generation community and stuff like that was kind of the involvement of corporations and fossil fuel companies within the conference. I think I kind of had a warped perception that that wasn't happening, or I didn't want to admit that it was in my brain, but that's a super interesting dynamic that I want to follow as someone who is really interested in divestment and like corporate policy when it comes to climate change. I think that that's gonna be something that I'm really gonna want to be listening to, like negotiations and stuff like that around. I mean, overall, I'm just super excited to kind of listen to like the negotiation side of it. But I think my biggest excitement is trying to hear like corporations defend their decisions against people who are living through the climate crisis. I think I'm interested to kind of see how that argument is going to be framed and how people are going to be working with that.
Yes, Lucia's going after the fossil fuel companies. Manny?
I also want to follow like First Nations reparations and see how they're really combating climate crisis, as well as just indigenous organizations around the world, and see just what kind of work they're doing and how they're and like what perspective they're bringing in and how they're choosing to really like dig deep into this. And also, I'm probably gonna get distracted at some point and go down a completely different route. But what I'm hoping to bring back, just all the different perspectives and people I'll meet, bring back into my work and see how I can make my work more fruitful and better to my own community. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Nick?
Yeah, I'm very similar to Jen in that one, really excited to hear I'm considered a young person. That's great. And two, as an educator, it's vital to hear what young people want and need from their education. And it always frustrates me that young people aren't in the room when educators talk about curriculum or pedagogy or policy. Because whenever questions come up about, what's going to benefit students the most, and then students aren't in the room, that seems counterintuitive. But I would like to hear from young people and follow that strand so that can better inform the programming that I do at the Center for Climate Literacy. And in addition to bringing that back to the center, I'm really hoping to find ways to grow community and build coalitions across communities too. In my own work, I'm really interested in ecological democracy and rethinking what democracy means in a climate changing world. What I'm learning from the political scientists writing about this is that this is going to have to happen on a local level. And the main challenge is finding ways to link up and then coordinate. So hoping to bring that back too.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. Ramiro Vasquez Jr.
Yeah, I will be there 2 weeks, so I'm really excited to follow the opening and closing ceremony and how that unfolds throughout the entire 2 week span. Beyond the Indigenous Peoples Pavilion and gender equity, nature and biodiversity, I want to transition and really focus on food, water, and agriculture. Primarily water because I'm very connected, born and raised by the Mississippi River. And agriculture because we're understanding methane needs to be reduced, and we need food. Food sovereignty is something that's very important to me as well. I want to bring back primarily some content. Last year, I was able to connect with some Indigenous peoples from Alaska who had real life stories from the indigenous peoples, Inuits of that area, sharing to the greater public. That was very powerful to me, the stories, and sharing that narrative to the students and our community here. And I'll pass it to Zoe.
Thanks, Romero. Yeah, there's so much I'm excited about for COP. I think one thing I'm particularly interested in is connecting with other non-governmental party observers that are there, to build relationships. Like a personal goal of mine is to come back with like 2 new relationships from different organizations from around the world, to really build, international community working on local level climate action. When it comes to negotiations, I am really interested in maybe some of the higher level negotiations that are happening. I know that right now in the news, there's a lot of discussion around how this is the climate or the finance COP. And so I'm really curious how larger nations and nations that are expected to be paying more of their fair share will be showing up at this COP, particularly because I think we should have a really close eye on how they're taking that action, and I anticipate it might not be in the way that we're looking for them to show up. So that's one part of it. And then for inspiration, I think similarly to Ramiro, I find food systems and agriculture a very interesting component of how we think about mitigation efforts. I have a deep belief that, we need to be taking care of each other as climate change is impacting people's lives. And so I think that particular passion comes out in maybe agriculture and food systems. But I think ultimately, I'm just really curious about how are other organizations taking action to support their communities, and come up with mitigation efforts, because we're seeing over the past couple months, we see this onslaught and all this news, right, of people, the human impact, and it's not just right the past couple months. But I think I say this because I really am curious, how are our local communities planning and acting to protect each other, often when larger nations are disappointing us on that international scale, and that we should be calling them out for, but how then can we be inspired at that local level? Yeah, so I'll pass it back over to Susan and also share my screen because I think we'll be moving on in continuation of the presentation.
Thanks, Zoe. We have one question in the Q&A and I'm going to get to it in a second. But I just want to make sure folks who have tuned in to hear from the delegates understand exactly what they're going to be doing while they're at COP. They're going to be attending events and panels and pavilion and side event programming and observing negotiations wherever possible. They're going to generate content, blogs, poems, photos, video interviews, reactions, feelings, observations, which you will be able to read about every other day in the Window into COP29 digest that we publish. And then we will be broadcasting live on November 14th and the 21st. So 2 Thursdays, it'll be about 9 p.m. in Baku and I think 11 a.m. Central Time, where they're just going to have a conversation like we've had tonight and kind of pass the mic and tell us all what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, what they're noticing, observing, and feeling. And they're going to learn how others are implementing solutions across the globe. Everybody sort of touched on this, and it was one of my takeaways from COP27. There's an amazing amount of work being done on the planet, and people are doing things in really hyper-local ways that we don't get to hear about because it doesn't hit the mainstream news and it doesn't get shared really broadly, but it's super inspirational. So we're going to learn together from all of our delegates about things happening in the world. Next slide. So here's some ways you can stay engaged. Claire just dropped into the chat where you can sign up to get the window into COP Digest delivered to your email box every other day during the 2 weeks of COP. And then the link where you can register to come to one or both of those webinars. So live from COP on the 14th of November and live from COP 2 on November 21st. So please stay engaged and follow along. The real learning and the real juicy stuff comes during the actual conference. And just listening to all of our delegates tonight has me super excited to see COP29 and to see Baku and to see this particular COP through their eyes. I can't wait, actually. I'm so excited. So excited. Okay, I'm going to pull up the Q&A so we can answer Rebecca's question. For those of you who have attended previously, how do you think the smaller numbers of attendees will change the conference? Anali is gone, so that's Ramiro and maybe myself. And I don't know. Has anybody on the call heard about the numbers being fewer, the numbers of attendees being fewer? I know that the UNFCCC rearranged how they distribute badges and to be more equitable in terms of how they distribute observer badges, but I haven't heard anything specific about fewer attendees. I don't know if that's by design or by the fact that the location is hard to get to. Zoe, you were nodding your head. Do you have something?
I have heard that this year is smaller, and I think it speaks to the fact that this is the third year in a row COP has been hosted in a petro state. I think that smaller numbers means that it's even more important that delegations like ours are attending. To the point that I was making before, just that it's really important to be, documenting what's happening at COP, not through this lens of like hyper neutrality, because the things that happen and when there's activists protesting and calling out nation states for not acting, that is a really important part of this process. So it's hard to say if that is going to mean, Azerbaijan itself is not a nation where necessarily you can be marching in the streets or having protests. Like that will probably be happening already, and that's happened in past COPs as well, like in the past couple of years where it needed to happen in the green zone. But I think it just means that there's less voices at play in the discussion, which there might be other areas like the New York Climate Week where we saw people flocking to, but this is still one of the world's largest conferences each year to have these conversations. And so I think it's a bit of for me, it's a concerning trend that people are not seeing the United Nations act seriously. That's my perspective on it. So I think maybe, I don't know if it, aside from there being less people in the conversation, what that might hold. And I'm curious, I'll be really curious to see how this plays out. But I see it as this longer term trend. What does that mean 5 years from now for what COP negotiations represent in our world? Maybe not good, but maybe there'll be other spaces that are taking action more seriously. I'm not sure.
Thanks, Zoe. Rebecca typed into the Q&A an appreciation for the observations and agrees that those who are in attendance have greater obligation to share their perspectives. I think one of the caveats that I forgot to share in the sort of COP 101 is that decisions are made by consensus. And that is a big part of why the pace of decision-making and negotiations at that official level is so slow, because 129 entities all need to agree on every single thing. So that, you know, consensus is a hard thing with a room full of 2 people, 3 people, 5 people. It's really hard when it's 129 groups of people. Any other questions? Feel free to pop them into the chat. We have 3 minutes left. No more questions? Doesn't look like it. Well, I hope that all of you who tuned in tonight are as excited as I am about this delegation and their voices being present at COP. Please sign up to get the digest and join us for the other 2 COP live webinars. Let's keep learning together. Let's keep advocating for the planet and for life. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody.